Historic Lewistown, Pennsylvania. It was the first stop on Classic American Cinema's 5-city, 6-theater tour that took about 4 days back in the fall of 2024. Lewistown is a great little all-American city right in the center of Pennsylvania, and it's home to the Embasy Theater. Now this visit's going to be a little bit different because we've never visited a theater that was under restoration. But there's no one more qualified to tell us about the restoration and the history of the Embasy Theater than Friends of the Embasy president, Paul Fagley.
The Embasy Theater in Lewistown, Pennsylvania was opened on October 17, 1927. It replaced an earlier theater that had been built on the same site in 1916. That was called the National Theater. The Embasy building is actually part of that original theater. The Embasy was designed by taking elements from big city theaters, particularly the recently opened Roxy Theater in New York City. We know that the original builder and owner of it, Harold Cohen, went up there and copied details from the Roxy. So in many ways, this is kind of like a mini Roxy. The architect that Howard hired was from Philadelphia. His name was Albert Douglas Hill. He was actually from England. So this theater represents more of an English mindset in architecture that is a bit more conservative than the American architects were of the time. The first movie in here was American Beauty that starred actress Billy Dove. And from there, it was a silent movie theater in the first year of its operation. About a year after it opened is when talkies came on the market, and the theater was upgraded to allow talkie films. All three theaters did this, although the Embasy was the first one to have permanently installed sound equipment. Here they used the Vitatone Movietone system. But the Embasy was kind of the culmination of theater design in Lewistown. At the time, there were two other theaters that were operating here when it was opened, the Pastime Theater and the Rialto Theater. Both of those theaters preceded the Embasy by several years, even preceded the National. The Embasy was kind of like the grand lady of theaters in Lewistown. It was the most ornate and the most luxurious of the three. So the Embasy was kind of like the place to go. Many older people that I've talked to expressed it in similar ways, which I've kind of consolidated into this statement. As a kid, you went to the Pastime because they showed Westerns. And matter of fact, they called the Pastime the Shoot and Juke or the Bucket of Blood or the Bang Bang. Roxy were some of the nicknames for that theater. But when you became a teenager, you went to the Rialto, which was largely MGM and Paramount Films. But when a young man wanted to impress his girl, he would bring her to the Embasy. And if he really wanted to impress her, he'd pay the extra 20 cents to sit up here on the loges on the front of the balcony.
All right, now that we have our history, let's go outside and work our way back into the Embasy with a tour from Paul.
This is the original box office that has been restored, including the original marble coin shelf with a coin cup in it. And this has all been, we had a family that donated walnut to us in order to replace some of the panels that had been damaged. This is the interior of our box office, including these nice details, which are surviving original. On the outside, we had to replicate them because they were long gone. This is the mezzanine area of the theater. This was kind of a waiting area. Back in the day, they had continuous showing, so you might have arrived at the theater during the middle of a showing and had to wait until the next showing to see the complete movie. So this was a waiting area. It also had the ladies' lounge and restrooms on this level. And then this was the usher's closet where they kept their uniforms. The uniforms were patterned after the ones in the Roxy, what the ushers wore. Yeah, an area like this from a mezzanine to a balcony, although the term isn't generally used today, it was known as a vomitory. And this is from the Latin word meaning to expel. So anytime you have a tunnel from a seating area to a mezzanine level, that's what it was called. So anyway, let's go up here now to the balcony and take a look at the theater. And we're on the crossover area now, and this accessed the two basic areas of the balcony. The three rows here in the front were known as the loge. And the seats here were a little bit more padded with hand-woven tapestry rather than the velvet and leather on the other seats. In the day, it cost you a dime extra to sit in this level. Now, today people kind of chuckle at that, but when a ticket was 25 cents, 35 cents was quite an increase over that ticket price. And there were 70 seats here in the loge, and in the Embassy, this was the higher end seating. We didn't have box seating or anything like that, so this was the highest price seating. And actually here, as far as we understand, they only had 2 levels of seating prices, the regular price and then the extra to sit up here in the loge. And then the upper balconies, there were seats as well. Now from here, we're going to go up and show you the projector room. This is the Embassy's projector room, largely what it was during most of the life of the theater. A lot of people may not realize this, but we're actually inside a concrete box. That's because in the early days, the film was very flammable, so that if a fire occurred, they had to be able to contain it that didn't set the whole theater on fire. This is the one surviving projector. There would have been 2 in here at one time. And this is actually one of the younger pieces in this room. This dates to the 1940s. And we also have, this is the original lighting panel for the house lights. This would be from 1927. And you had whites, reds, and blues. Yeah, because the projectionists could not leave the room, they had a restroom in the projector room for the projectionist. And this is some of the surviving original equipment. The Embassy continued to operate through World War II, and in 1949 we added another theater, the Miller Theater, which is currently operating. It has been converted into a 6-screen multiplex, but it's still here. There was another theater that kind of came and went. It was just at the wrong time and way too big for Lewistown. The other theaters, the Pastime would close in 1953 and the Rialto would follow in 1959. And the Embassy continued to operate until 1981 when it finally closed with the retirement of the original owner of it, Harold Cohen. When the Friends took over the Embassy, the building had been left go for the past couple years. The roof started to leak, which caused most of the plaster damage in here. Up until that point, when Harold died, the building was still in pretty good shape. So luckily, the water infiltration didn't cause a lot of structural damage, mostly caused plaster damage. All of the original architecture is still here. It wasn't gutted out or changed or chopped up. And so we have a very intact theater. In fact, we had an architect help us on a master plan a few years ago, and he couldn't believe, he said, it's rare to see this level of original architecture still existing that can be done. Matter of fact, he told me out of every 100 theaters that he surveys for his company, only about 1% are in this category. We replicated the original marquee of 1,000 lights. The original panels were in such bad condition that you just couldn't do anything with them. So we opted for a replication, and a local company fabricated it for us. And we chose to build it out of aluminum rather than steel, as the original one was. First off, it's lighter, but also more corrosion resistant. And we're using computer controllers rather than the old mechanical systems in order to animate it. But it's a beautiful marquee. When it was installed in 1927, it was said to be the most elaborate marquee between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. But we can still blend it. Our restroom is a perfect example of that. It's in the old men's room. It's now a single-user restroom. We've blended new fixtures with architectural features that mimic the original, like subway tile on the walls. We have a tile that resembles a pink terrazzo. When we were working on the room, we discovered the original floor underneath was a pink terrazzo. Unfortunately, there was so much of it missing and it was badly out of level, we just couldn't reveal it. And one of the things in it too is the original window in the restroom has been fully restored. That's one of the things I was able to do for this project because I could do woodworking. My father was a cabinet maker, finish carpenter, taught me all his skill. Just didn't do it as a profession, but I can do it. And it was fun rebuilding that because the window casing, the outside of it, basically had to be totally rebuilt. And that included steaming wood in order to bend it, in order to make the round top on the window. But I think it really sets it off nice and shows a little bit about what we're going to do throughout the building. We do have the theater listed on the National Historic Register. It was entered on that in 1998. I spent 4 years researching it. I love to do research. And comparing it not just to this, I compared it to the other theaters of the time. So I have a lot of information on the theater history of Mifflin County that maybe one of these days it'll end up in a book. The following summer, it was rented out to some local bands for a couple months. And then by the fall of 1982, that was the last things that were held in the Embassy. For the next decade, the original owner tried to sell the theater, but he rejected several offers, as we know, because they wanted to tear it down or gut it out or whatever. He really wanted to see the Embassy to be restored, and he passed away in 1989, never realizing that dream. After a couple of years, the family decided to put it on the market to close the estate. And that's when an organization formed called Friends of the Embassy Theater. And they were able to raise enough money to purchase the theater in 1991. And since that point, we have been working to restore the theater back to its original elegance. And the reason for that is today's generations don't always have the opportunity to see a film in a historic theater in a setting that was designed for the showing of films. Today, multiplexes are basically just a bland box with a screen on one end. You know, so coming in a place like this, when we have kids in here, even in its disheveled state now, they're awed by the place, the beauty of it. And a lot of them, particularly as teenagers and older, would express an interest. They would love to come to a theater like this and experience what was it like during the heyday. Going forward, our ultimate plan for the Embassy is to kind of remodel it a bit into a multi-use theatrical facility. We really here in Mifflin County, outside of the high school auditoriums, don't have a space like this for local functions. So like say if somebody wanted to hold a business meeting or something like that and needed an auditorium space, they'd have to go out of the county for that. So this could serve those purposes. The Embassy, as it was built primarily as a movie theater, but it did have a small stage in it for some limited vaudeville and stand-up and Roy Rogers and Trigger, as we say. We want to make it that it can really be used for different things, including movies. Maybe we're not looking at first-run movies here, maybe historic movies, second runs, film festivals, bands in here, and concerts, children's theater, stage productions. Could be a rentable hall, like say somebody wants to rent it for weddings or something like that, or a local group wants to do a variety show or something. So we're really looking at that multi-use. To kind of accommodate that. I mean, these places weren't just movie theaters, they called them picture palaces for a reason. And this theater embodies that late 1920s when they called it the Broadway Picture Palace era. That you really thought you were hobnobbing with wealthy. This kind of design went out with the Great Depression. They could no longer afford to build like this, and new art styles like Art Deco and stuff came in. So really, theaters like this, from the late 20s are the last survivors of that era. So here, the last Friday of September in 2024, for the first time since 1982, we were able to actually hold an event in the theater. And that was a milestone for us to get to this point, because it's been a long road to do that.